Do you want to live forever?
Well, I don't know how. I probably should not have led that way. Probably misleading. I may have figured out how to live a little bit longer though. I can tell you how. I'm not sure you're gonna like it though. If you've seen any of my other videos, you might be thinking, Dan, another longevity video? But you just did one of those. Aren't you concerned that people might pigeonhole you into longevity content? Or more likely, since I've made only 3 videos before, you're probably thinking, who is this guy? He's funny and handsome, but what authority does he have to tell me about health? First of all, thank you. But can you guys just chill for a second? I'm about to get to all that. As far as authority goes, I do have a degree in human health and I've been working in the healthcare industry for about 6 years. So I theoretically should know more than the average person about how to be healthy. But honestly, one of the things I learned from school and working in the healthcare industry is that the word health has a very broad definition. And I know saying all this might make me sound unhealthy. I decided I want to make another longevity video because I do try to be healthy, but I think I could sometimes become overwhelmed by all the different options for diets and lifestyles and habits that all seem to have different conflicting bodies of evidence. A healthy lifestyle can mean a lot of different things. It could mean achieving a muscular body, or being able to run an incredible distance, or optimizing your lifestyle to live as long as you possibly can. But they all require different and sometimes even contradicting diets and general ways of life. And unfortunately, they're all kind of hard. I don't know about you, but sometimes I get so wrapped up in my work and I'm slouching at my computer and I'm not drinking enough water. Sometimes I'm too busy to go to the gym, so I just sit in this chair for hours. And then of course I don't have time to make anything good to eat, so I make some macaroni and cheese from Trader Joe's, which is really delicious. And all of those things I know for sure are not good for you. Like, what's enough to be healthy? Like, what's the bare minimum? I swam competitively for like 15 years, and since then I've been lifting weights with varying frequency. I've mostly always eaten a decently high protein diet to try to maintain some muscle, but it's not always easy to do that. And then on top of that, finding the time to go to the gym and increase intensity of workouts to make progress on any goals is like a whole other problem. And then the stress I get from not going to the gym ends up totally offsetting any benefits I might have gotten from going to the gym and de-stressing that way. I know if you put carbon under stress, it turns it into a diamond, but when you put me under stress, it usually just makes me cry. Literally trying so hard to do all of the things that are supposed to make me healthy are ultimately leading to me being less healthy. So I've been thinking recently maybe I'm overthinking all this health stuff, which is why I got excited when I saw this study on the internet that concluded low carbohydrate diets were associated with significantly higher risk for all-cause mortality. I love carbs, man. And I do things like jaywalking a lot. So if I could have a diet that let me just survive on like linguine and waffles and lowered my risk of dying of any cause, that would be ideal. While the conclusion of this study and others like it obviously isn't that you can just eat any carbs you want all the time and still be considered healthy, it did remind me of a concept I heard a few years ago when I was watching the Zac Efron documentary Down to Earth on Netflix. It's the concept of blue zones, which are basically just regions of the world where people on average live longer lives than the rest of the world. These zones also have high rates of people living into their hundreds, especially when compared to a lot of Western society. I remember learning about them specifically because of how nervous Zac Efron looked when he learned that high-protein, low-carb diets are bad for longevity. Look how nervous he is about eating too much protein. Now, to be fair, he had an excuse. You can't build the huge amounts of hulking muscle required to become the high school basketball star on a low-protein diet, and I know that. And then, by random chance, just as I was starting research for this video, Netflix came out with another documentary that followed someone named Dan Buettner, who was one of the biggest longevity and blue zone researchers out there. He invented the word blue zone and started a website called bluezones.com. Can't really show too much footage from the documentary because it's Netflix, but I found it pretty compelling. I obviously did some more research after watching it, and it really does seem like all these people in all these countries all across the world have a lot of habits and mindsets in common, like with their diet, exercise, relationship, attitudes. Too many to be a coincidence. All of this culminated in me deciding that if I want to be actually healthy, that a longevity diet is probably a pretty safe bet. While the habits of the people in the blue zone are pretty straightforward, consistently doing all of them and integrating them into a busy daily life still sounded like a challenge. But I did the Ice Bucket Challenge back in 2014, so I think you could tell I'm pretty much down for any challenge. So after doing all this research, I decided I would spend the next 2 weeks of my life trying to live like the people of the blue zones, to discover, is it even feasible as a modern millennial to live a healthy longevity lifestyle? I'm pretty excited. So this Dan Buettner guy has spent decades visiting blue zones and learning what they have in common. So I found his website to be a great resource when I was trying to decide how to spend my time during this experiment. we can call it. He breaks the Blue Zone lifestyle into 9 denominators, as he calls them. Those can be grouped into move, right outlook, eat wisely, and connect. The first is moving naturally. The people in the Blue Zones do things like tend to sheep, garden, or ride horses or woodwork in their garages well into their old age. They don't go to the gym or train for marathons or anything like that. They just naturally have jobs and hobbies that build movement naturally into their day. I currently have a very sedimentary job, so I'm gonna have to fudge this one a little bit. So the Blue Zone website looks like it recommends walking 10K steps a day and trying to find ways to be naturally active and have active hobbies. I guess I have to break out my first generation Apple Watch I haven't touched in 6 years if I want to track the amount of steps I'm taking in a day. It still works. I think I'm gonna aim for about 8,000 steps a day. I mean, I live in a city and I'm used to walking places and going on runs and going to the gym, so I'm really not too worried about this part. The next two are about your outlook on life. It is important to have a purpose and a reason to wake up in the morning, and it is important to take time to rest and de-stress every day. Some of the men in the documentary in Italy who were working on a sheep farm well into their 90s would work hard in the morning and then take the afternoons off. I like the idea of this part because I know that stress contributes heavily to disease, so it makes sense that the people in the Blue Zone would be able to chill out. But I have a job that I work like 8 to 12 hours a day, and I can't say I feel like it's my glamorous life calling the way that a sheep farmer might describe their life. So I'm gonna do my best with this part, but we'll see if I'm able to find time to relax. Then over here we have the Connect tenet comprised of belong, loved ones first, and right tribe. Basically, being social, spending time with family and friends, and finding community in places like church are important habits of long-living people. I'm gonna try my best with this part too. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love spending time with friends and going out in public and stuff. Everyone I know have such different schedules that it really makes it hard to find time to meet up. This is something very unique to just me, and I know that nobody watching this will be able to relate. But I am going to make an effort to spend time with people around me. The final 3 habits are based around food. They eat until they're 80% full at most meals. I'm actually personally pretty good at not overstuffing myself at meals, but I do have a bad habit of snacking on a bunch of junk food at like 10 p.m. after a day of eating clean. Hey, it's not my fault I bought the 72-pack of Eggo waffles from Costco. I mean, I guess it is. But I think reducing the late night snacking is what I personally need to focus on. Wine at 5 is something I'm pretty excited about. In Italy especially, people who live a long time seem to drink daily but never really binge drink. And they specifically drink a lot of wine. So I'm gonna aim to have 1 to 2 glasses of wine a day as part of my attempt to chill out. The final circle here is plant slant, which I personally think is a bit of an under-exaggeration. There's another section of the website that goes into the diet more in depth. On first glance, it looks pretty intuitive and straightforward, but then it gets a little bit more upsetting when you read the bigger chart. This part is why I said you might not like this lifestyle at the beginning of the video. It's honestly not that bad, but it does cut down on a lot of foods that I personally really like, which is a bit of a bummer. But I guess it's not shocking to learn that the lifestyle that might help you live the longest also happens to have a hefty dose of vegetables involved. On a monthly basis, you should reduce dairy and try to eat small amounts of meat 5 times a month. I spent over 2 years of my life not eating any meat, so this part shouldn't be too difficult for me. That being said, I do like cheese and meat, so I'm not exactly thrilled to cut it out. People in the Blue Zones do eat these things in moderation though, so I'm glad there is a little bit of wiggle room with this diet. Getting rid of processed and added sugar makes sense. If you thought this was the one healthy diet in the world that also included Twinkies, then sorry to break it to you this way. Eggs should be eaten sparingly, same with fish. I have both of those things pretty often, but I'll try to keep them to a minimum or likely cut them out completely in the next few weeks. And on a daily basis, I'm going to try to eat mixed nuts as a snack, drink only coffee, water, and wine. All of the people in the different Blue Zones kind of built their diet around beans, which I guess makes sense. I like beans and already incorporate them into my current diet, so I can appreciate this part. The little fat I do eat should be healthy fats from like olive oil or avocados. The rest of the food I eat should be whole foods, not processed, and mostly plant-based. Some examples given are beans, greens, yams and sweet potatoes, fruits, nuts, and seeds. The best of the best longevity foods are leafy greens such as spinach, kale, beet, and turnip tops, shards, and collards. Gross. But then it also says to try a variety of fruits and vegetables, know which ones you like, and keep your kitchen stocked with them. This all makes sense. There are not a ton of vegetables I like, and that's part of what keeps me from eating them that often. The other reason, besides them being kind of gross, is that they go bad so fast if you don't store them correctly, which I don't. I think when comparing this diet to my regular diet, incorporating vegetables into my meals is where I really go wrong. The people who live in these blue zones are able to make meals that are low fat and still taste good because they know how to mix all these different ingredients and create plant-based meals that actually taste good. When I try to make a low fat meal, I just end up making like plain pasta with salt on it or something. The website has a whole section full of longevity recipes. I think I'm going to follow these for the first few days to get an idea of what I like and then figure out what fits into my life the easiest. And I'll make sure I'm tracking what I'm eating the first few days, like the macros and how many calories everything is. I'm gonna try to do the 80% full thing and eat right around my maintenance calories. And then after that, I'm gonna branch off and just focus on relaxing and seamlessly integrating into that longevity lifestyle. So the start to this experiment was pretty chaotic. I bought way too many groceries. I'd gone through all the recipes on the website and picked out what I thought went best and ordered all of the ingredients. Almost $400 worth of ingredients. I think part of the reason it was so expensive was because I bought mostly organic ingredients, which is, a part of all this. But mostly I just didn't even realize how much of each thing I was buying because I bought it on an app and didn't realize how big each of the bags were going to be. Some of it went to like spices and sauces and other things that I could eat for a while though. My point is just that I don't think this diet is supposed to be expensive. I just overdid it. Also, since I just went through a list of recipes and just kind of picked out what I thought sounded best, I don't really know that I did this whole thing correctly. Like, I've had chia seed pudding before and I liked that, so I thought that I would have that for my first day for breakfast. But I made way too much and also needed to eat way too much of it to even feel 80% full. I'm pretty sure it must have been meant as like a side or a snack or something because 500 calories worth of chia seed pudding was pretty gross. It also really stressed me out when I realized that this small handful of nuts that I'm supposed to have daily was almost 400 calories. That's like a whole meal! Walking also surprised me. Like I mentioned earlier, I lift at the gym and I run and I walk around the city that I live in. I used to exercise like 20 to almost 40 hours a week when I swam in college. And I'd walk like everywhere I went on top of that. Granted, that was over 6 years ago, but I still expected the walks to be more of an annoying and unfortunate part of this experience. Like, I was pretty sure that they were just going to stress me out, be boring, and that I would spend the entire time just missing my couch and TV. But, and I am embarrassed to say this, but walking is kind of hard. Walking is kind of hard, guys. What the fuck? When I run, I go to like 1 to 2 miles tops, usually as a warm-up for another workout. And then when I'm lifting weights, I usually take a ton of breaks in between. I'll sometimes go for like 10-mile hikes with friends or something like that, but I give myself time to recover and I'm not consistent with that at all. I guess when you're trying to walk 5 full miles every single day, it's actually pretty legit exercise. I was exhausted at like 10 o'clock every night for the first few nights that I walked 5 miles, and that's pretty early for me. And then on top of all of that, there were like 4 2-week periods at work throughout the year that I'm like crazy busy. And I decided that I was going to do all of this during that 2-week period. So I'm trying to make myself food, track it all in an app, walk like 5 miles a day, and then work for 12 hours a day. And all of that stuff is really stressful, which is kind of antithetical to all these habits clearly designed to reduce stress. But hey, longevity doesn't care if you had a lot to do at work and that walking made you sleepy. It just cares that you're taking care of yourself in the right way. So I persevered. Also, speaking of sleepy, I don't know if you've had 1 to 2 glasses of wine before, but that part also wasn't as fun as I was hoping. The point of the wine is to help you wind down and provide you with antioxidants. But having too much of it would constitute binge drinking. But I personally found that just a glass or 2 ended up making me more sleepy on top of working and walking all day. Okay, I feel like I came out of the gate hard here with all this negative stuff. Don't worry, it was not all that bad. Things might have been kind of chaotic for the first like 3 days or so, but I eventually figured out how to integrate a lot of these habits into my life. I quickly learned how to make some staples that I liked and made cooking easier. I started making this carrot cake overnight oats that were really good and used maple syrup as a sweetener. I made these bean and avocado tacos a bunch of days because they were easy and filling and nutritious. I made rice noodle stir fry, fried rice, and edamame sushi bowls, which are things I already make all the time. But the recipes from the Blue Zone website taught me how to keep the fat content low, include fruits and vegetables, and still make it taste good. Walking became easier as time went on, as exercise tends to do when you're consistent with it. It really did improve my mood on a daily basis and also forced me to take like an 1.5-hour break from work every day, which I kind of needed. And since it wasn't like an intense workout where I was really pushing myself, it was more of a distressor than, say, going to the gym and trying to force myself to work harder than I did the week before. I unfortunately don't think I ever really improved on being more social. I think overall while I'm pretty social already, my girlfriend Erin's birthday was over the weekend in the middle of this experiment. More good planning. So I did spend 3 days in a row with friends. I did also make some time in the second week to go to a comedy show with some friends. Don't worry, I got goat cheese ravioli there. Goat cheese is on the website, so it's okay. I also checked out a church near me that I heard has a great sense of community. I talked to some people in there, and it actually does sound pretty great, I'm not gonna lie. And they were actually super excited to talk to me and get me to come back. Go figure. I could really see myself going to church more often, but I'll tell you guys more about Xenu later. As I started to near the end of the experiment, I did start to restrict some certain restrictions I put on myself. Like I got Chipotle a couple of times, but Chipotle counts. I got the one with tofu, sofritas, and brown rice, and vegetables, and no cheese. That counts. Show me the rule that says that doesn't count. Honestly, if I learned one thing from this, it's probably that Chipotle is the key to living forever. I did give in right at the end and I got a McDonald's milkshake and food from one of these stands on the side of the road selling burritos. And that was so good. And I didn't really feel bad about it because I had been pretty good for 2 weeks. I didn't personally feel any consequences from that, like where you might expect. But after the 2 weeks were up, I did try taking off a day from walking. I thought that I had walked enough and that a day off from walking would be nice and relaxing. But I felt awful the next day. I had all this like anxious, nervous energy that didn't go away until I finally did go for a walk. So I guess I would just like to take this opportunity to thank Dan Buettner for breaking my body. I now know that I feel better if I do at least some exercise during a day, even if it's a short walk. And that is so disappointing. But overall, now that I've completed the experiment, do I feel like every part of this lifestyle is worth it and feasible for myself? Well... Alright, let's start with some of the benefits that I noticed. I didn't mention this at the start of the video, but because this diet required such little protein and exercise, I was really concerned that I was going to lose muscle and gain fat. I'm not in the best shape of my life, but I do try to maintain some muscle tone and it's important to me. I recorded my weight at the beginning and end of the experiment, and also took photos to see if there was any change in my general appearance. I just want you to know that I am currently a little bit self-conscious about my body, so it is very brave of me to be putting these photos of myself on the internet. I recorded myself at 187 pounds at the beginning of the experiment and 181 pounds at the end. I really doubt that I actually lost 6 pounds that fast. So I'm imagining I was probably maybe like a little bit bloated the first day, and maybe I lost some water weight and a little bit of muscle over the course of 2 weeks. I did do a few quick sets of bodyweight exercise sprinkled throughout the week, but I really mostly just walked. And honestly, I don't really think I lost much muscle based on the pictures. This might be a different story if I went longer than 2 weeks, of course. But I was happy to learn that I can go 2 weeks without doing any exercise and not completely deflated. There's also clearly something to be said about walking too. I even feel stronger in some ways from walking every day. I think my posture might have improved a little bit. I don't think you're necessarily supposed to do all 5 miles at once. In fact, I think you're definitely not supposed to do all 5 miles at once, but that's what I was able to make time for. I think out of everything that I made an effort to integrate into my life during this experiment, walking was definitely the GOAT. The diet that I had throughout this wasn't too different from what I normally eat, but I hesitate to say whether this diet is really feasible at this point in my life. The meals that I had were generally really tasty, and I get that they're nutritious, but I did still struggle to incorporate greens like spinach or kale, and they were definitely the worst part of the few dishes I did put them into. I also did one day where I recorded what I was eating and tried to focus on dish options that were highest in protein to see if it would be possible to build muscle with this lifestyle. And the highest that I was able to get to was 102 grams of protein, which would not really be enough to grow muscle. And I needed to have 2,757 calories that day to even achieve that. The rest of the days I got like 60 to 70 grams of protein, which might be enough for you if you aren't trying to build or maintain muscle. But it just felt a little bit low for the goals that I personally have. The social part of this was the most difficult and arguably the most important. I obviously spend time with my friends and my girlfriend, but over the week it's really hard. I think this is something I'll probably work towards over time. I didn't really have time when making this video to make a group of friends all within walking distance who were all willing to hang out every night for 2 weeks straight. I think a theme that might have become pretty obvious over the course of this video is that all these habits are really designed to reduce stress at the end of the day. I think that's what's really at the core of this lifestyle. And that's probably what you need to focus on the most if you're looking to live a long, healthy life. I think as time goes on and I get older, I'll slowly transition to doing these habits more regularly. But for now, while I've definitely learned some habits that I'm going to take into my daily life, I don't really think maintaining this lifestyle is something I could be strict about right now. Like, I'm gonna eat meat sometimes, and I'm going to drink more than I probably should sometimes. But I'll also probably try to lean more on carbs and go for a walk if I'm not able to make it to the gym that day. Also, I looked into the studies they've done on the blue zones, and yeah, they live longer than the average population and sometimes have more 100-year-olds. But it's not like everyone in these places is living incredibly long lives. We're talking like 7 years more than the United States average, which might sound like a lot, but kind of a low bar, right? Blue zones are also relatively small areas with towns surrounding them that have very similar lifestyles, but don't always necessarily see the same longevity benefits that the people living in the blue zones do. For example, one of the studies in Sardinia said that longevity goes up the higher in elevation that someone lives. Like if you lived higher up on the hill, that meant that you walked more stairs on a daily basis, which subsequently meant that you lived longer. But like, if longevity is that touchy, then all of these restrictions are definitely not worth it. Like, imagine doing everything else right, eating a perfect diet all of your life, and then dying earlier than your chain-smoking neighbor because his house is on a 20-degree slope and yours is only on like a 10. And stuff like that does happen. At the end of the day, it seems like longevity partially has to do with genetics, partially has to do with stress, and partially has to do with all these other healthy habits. And like I said in my first video on longevity, linked here, check it out. Humans are literally programmed to die, so there's really only so much we can do with diet and exercise to extend our lifespan. I think that if you generally try to keep to good health advice, get good and frequent exercise, avoid really unhealthy foods, and make an effort to be social, you're doing pretty good. Or maybe this video has helped you decide that putting in the extra effort to live a few more healthy years really isn't worth it for you. I mean, I'll just say it. Living a shorter life is convenient, both in the sense that there's literally less life that you need to plan for, and that you can live your life however you want without stress. Honestly, an attitude like that might be what you need the most to truly live a long life, at least a fulfilling one. All right, I've been talking for a while, so it's time for me to go. I have an idea that I think the Chipotle marketing team is going to really like. Bye.